Hi there, and welcome to chapter one of the analysis project that I'm currently covering entitled Africa and the Cardinals Falling. If you haven't watched chapter zero, which covers the preliminaries that explain the motivation behind this analysis project, I highly encourage you to go back and watch that so you'll understand some of the nitty gritties you require, even as I move across the rest of the project. So, just to kind of segue from that, I will be covering this region by region of Africa based on the UN Geo scheme. And to start with, we're going to look at Central Africa here in chapter one. Now, a quick overview of what we're going to cover is we'll look at the countries in Central Africa, and then we're going to go through the various metrics that we're going to compare the cardinal vis-a-vis the silent contender in this region. So we've got the population, we've got GDP and real GDP growth rate, we've got debt to GDP. I'll come back to this in a second. We've got inflation, and here inflation is CPI inflation, consumer price index, sorry. Then there's the USD forex rate, and then finally we'll have a conclusion that compares the cardinal vis-a-vis the silent contender across these metrics here. Now, for the debt to GDP, unfortunately for Central Africa, I wasn't able to find up-to-date statistics for the debt to GDP numbers. Uh, IMF was only able to have data from 2013 to 2015, so that, as you can imagine, is rather outdated. So we won't have any comparison to address here, but we'll think there'll be enough information across the other metrics that I've given in the overview to give us a strong enough base to finalize in the conclusion section. So to start off, we've got the countries in Central Africa. I got this really good map from World Atlas. They're able to zone in on a particular region of a continent, in this case Africa, and give us the various countries. So we have Chad, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Sao Tome and Principe. So that's the island nation, the smallest one here. You've got Congo, Central African Republic, Congo Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then finally Angola. Now, to start, we'll start with the population. And so, looking at the region's population, we see that Central Africa, as of end of last year, had a total population of 197 million people. So, a few things to note is one, DRC is the largest country here in a sense, although perhaps Angola might be larger in terms of surface area, but if you're looking, largest here is in reference to the number of people in that nation. So DRC as of end of last year accounted for a little over half of all the population of Central Africa at 100 million people. And then followed by that was Angola at 37 million, Cameroon 29 million, all the way till Sao Tome and Principe. It's, as you can imagine, not very visible from this chart because it only has about quarter of a million people total population. So that's the smallest nation here. But you can see just the distribution here. DRC has the largest chunk here. Now, the population for this region has been growing by approximately 5 million people year on year, and so it keeps trending upwards since 2013. Not really a surprise there, but in Africa, that is, I imagine there's other places where population is going down, but for this one, it's been going up consistently. So we anticipate that in 2024, you'll have even more numbers than the 197 million here. Next, we look at the total GDP. And here we can see that as of end of last year, because it's the nearest relevant time period, we have the total GDP from Central Africa being $270 billion. Now, of this, if you break it down by the countries involved, the largest contributor was Angola with 34%, followed by DRC with 25% approximately, then Cameroon, and so on and so forth, all the way till Sao Tome and Principe. So here, the top two in terms of GDP at the end of last year was Angola and DRC. Going down into the trends for the whole region again, you can see there was kind of a plateau if you look at the GDP holistically. So 2013, 2014, it was high, then it kind of tapers down between 2015 and 2020. There's that valley in a sense, actually not a plateau, it's a valley. And then 2021, 2022, it's been trending upwards with a slight dip in 2023. And then when you focus on the real GDP growth rate, so this is a percentage change per year, we can see here it was high but started trending downwards, and then you've got this valley stage here, and then it starts picking up again till 2019. But in 2020, we got a negative real GDP growth rate, probably attributed to the effects of the pandemic. And then after that, it started increasing through 2022. And then there was that slight dip again in 2023. So, in a sense, it kind of also links with what happened when you're looking at the gross domestic product figures up top. Then, now focusing on the top two nations, still with GDP. As we identified earlier, Angola and DRC were the top two when you're looking at GDP. Now, what you'll first observe is that there's a very big difference in magnitude between Angola and DRC. So you can see when in 2013, it was Angola was essentially 4 to 5 times larger uh, in terms of the GDP. But interestingly, Angola has a very volatile trend when it comes to the GDP value. So it started off really high, but it went low, came a bit high again, but still relative to the highest peak, it hasn't reached that level again, because even the next peak in 2022 is almost similar to what was the case in 2017. And then it's just been going down since. And from 2022 to 2023, it was trending downwards. So perhaps this might continue at the end of this year, or it will uh, make an uptick after that. So Angola has been far above DRC for the most part, but I think from 2020 to 2023, things started shifting differently. But when you now consider that Angola in the GDP case is the cardinal, and then you've got DRC as your silent contender, this one is actually a case of a silent contender properly, because you're seeing DRC has just been trending upwards in terms of GDP. There was only this dip here in 2016, 2020, but since overall the trend has just been picking up, and it's basically on track to catch up to Angola or surpass it in a few years. So here we see a case of a silent contender who can possibly usurp the cardinal. Next up, we've got real GDP growth for the top two again. So now here, real GDP growth, you've got Cameroon and DRC. And as you can see here, just based on the difference in magnitude, DRC is the cardinal, and then Cameroon is a silent contender. Now, an interesting thing to note here is you'll see the trends are kind of moving in the same direction. So there are points where they're going down together, there are points where they're going up together. But there's places where they crossed in terms of who had the biggest dip. So in 2016, even though there was a decline, DRC had a larger dip than Cameroon. And then also in 2020, Cameroon had a bigger dip than DRC. But as you can see, there's a chance that even though Cameroon, there are times when it's been close to DRC, there's a very big difference in magnitude again, percentage change wise. And so, even though it's a silent contender in this case, it's highly unlikely that it will close this gap soon and maybe match or usurp DRC, unless, of course, a shock event happens and it majorly affects the performance of DRC's economy, in which case Cameroon would catch up. After this, we move to inflation for the whole region of Central Africa. So you can see it was very low between 2013 and 2016. The first significant peak was in 2018 at 4.6%. It dropped again until 2021, where it started picking up again. And then the next most significant peak was in 2022 at 7.6%. It slightly reduced to 5.5% inflation in 2023. And I mean, if this continues trending downwards at the end of this year, it'll have been good for the whole region. If it goes back up, then I'm sure that'll quite affect, it will mean that the Africans who've lived in this region have been quite affected therein. Then, if we drill down on the top two, we realize that the top two here are the ones who had the least inflation out of all the nations in Central Africa. Because remember, The lower the inflation rate, the better for the consumers. And consumers isn't the only group that benefit from this. Of course, you've got manufacturing industry, the industry, and so on and so forth. But here I just put this note here because most of the time it's easier to explain it from our consumer angle. Now, Congo had the lowest inflation rate, and you can see from 2016 till to last end of last year, it was rather stable. The deviations are not very erratic as compared to the silent contender in this case, which is Chad. Chad did have significant reductions in inflation. You can see negative inflation in 2016. You can see also in 2019 negative 1.57. But be that as it may, it still has very high peaks. You can see 2017, 2018, it was really high. 2014 again, you can see 2020, 2022. So you can see when it had peaks in inflation, they've been far above that of Congo. So in essence, Congo's kind of cost of living has been relatively stable across the years. And so even though um, Congo has been relatively stable, and Chad this time it has this significant declines in cost of living. Uh, there's not a chance. I'm not sure that the silent contender here would cross the cardinal in this case, Congo. Then we now move to an interesting one, which is the USD forex rate. So we start off with the trend of the top two, and here we're considering the whole period of 2013, January 1st, all the way to end of Q1 2024. Now, if you notice, Sao Tome's rate has been relatively stable. We had peaks definitely around 2023 here, 2017 here. But overall, it's been in the range of 18 to 20, 18 to 26, 27 there. So you can imagine, these guys are doing well for their currency. And then you've got Angola if you look at it holistically. So of course it benefited from these years before 2020, but since then things just went off the rails, and you can see it tried to recover here, but now ever since it's really gone low. And of one thing to note here is again, just similar to the inflation side, but now for forex, the y-axis has also been inverted here. You know, psychologically, when people look at a trend chart like this, the line that's usually at the top is one that's attributed to show better than the other lines below. And so a lower rate for USD is better because the lower your exchange rate, the stronger your currency relative to the dollar. So Sao Tome's is definitely stronger than sorry, Sao Tome is definitely stronger than Angola. And so we're looking at this period. Another thing to note, which is interesting, is both these countries had their last election in 2022. So just based off comparison of their policies, if you just look at 2022 moving forward, things haven't been going well for this regime in Angola because the rate is really poor. Way as in it's way poorer than the previous 5 years because the lowest here we can see is 667, but now it's at 839. It was at 839 at the end of Q1 2024, as compared to 2022 where it stayed relatively stable. There was definitely this peak in 2023, but it's just been around that level there. So these guys don't really uh, suffer from instability in terms of their forex rate. Now, if you now look at the same data but zone in on 2024, we can see that this year, again, Sao Tome is a cardinal. It's been relatively stable. It has the lowest forex rate in Central Africa. And the one that comes close second is Cameroon. So here another thing to note is that Cameroon is part of a group of countries within Central Africa that have decided to use the same currency, in this case the Central African franc. So the countries that use the Central African franc are all the countries except DRC, which uses its own currency, Angola, and Sao Tome. So here the chart, we only took one nation just to represent this better. And so you can see the difference between Sao Tome and the CAF nations is very wide. It's a very big uh, magnitude difference. And so we can see on average it's like 25 times weaker than Sao Tome's currency. So here the chances that this gap is bridged is very low. And so here Sao Tome as a cardinal is not really falling. A brief look at forex correlation. Here you've got the country codes just so you can interpret the chart here easily. Uh, Based on what I've shared earlier regarding the calf nations, you can imagine, of course, there'll be values of one across board for the currency rates. But when you look at the currency pair, the DRC against all the other nations' currencies, you'll realize they've got a weak positive correlation or weak uh, negative correlation. So you can see they are around zero, thereabout. So you can see if you're looking at Angola against DRC's currency, you can see there's a correlation of 16%. And then for the CAF nations, you can see -6%, -6% across board. So that's what this was interesting to see. Just when I was looking at a deep dive, I thought it was worth mentioning. Then, if you look at again the USD forex rate, but just now focusing on the trend of stability, here we're looking at the volatility, just looking at standard deviation. Sao Tome's rate, as you can imagine from what we've seen before, it's significantly stable. So you can see maybe the most unstable part was here 2022, but it's been less than one across board. And then Cameroon, as a representative of the other CAF nations, you can see the instability has been up, down, up, down, up, down. The y-axis has been inverted here again because the lower the sigma, so forex sigma is just the standard deviation of the forex rate, and so the lower the better. So you can see in 2022 it got really bad. It was like at 30. The forex sigma was at 30, so that's very high. It's been recovering. So, but then again, because of the difference in magnitude, this might not change anytime soon, even if we just link it back to what we saw. You've got rates in the 20s for Sao Tome, and then you've got rates in the 600s for the CAF nation. So, that's a big difference. And so, to come to the conclusion, we'll now look at the comparison between the cardinal and the silent contender. Here we've just got a note of the CAF nations, as I'd earlier mentioned, and then there's also this table here that shows you the next election for each of the nations. Remember, politics has a very big influence on the economics, so this is bound to have an influence on whether you think the policies that have been put in place in a government where there's a few years left before the next election are going to keep in place, in which case some things might remain the same or get worse or get better. It really depends with the kind of policies being implemented. So if you go across the metrics again, if you look at population, DRC is our cardinal, Angola was a silent contender. Because of the very big difference, DRC has 100 million people, Angola has 34. Very high chance, very low chance that the Angola will surpass the cardinal. So yeah, the cardinal isn't falling. You've got now GDP, where we've got Angola 34%, DRC around 25%. Here we notice that if you're looking at the trends and how both nations are moving, yes, Angola is bigger in terms of the magnitude difference, but DRC has been positively trending upwards for a significant period of time now. So there's a chance that the silent contender will usurp the cardinal here, in which case the indication of a falling cardinal is true. If you look at the real GDP growth rate, our cardinal was the DRC nation against the CAF nations. However, we realized that because of the magnitude difference, it's highly unlikely that the CAF nations will catch up to DRC anytime soon. For debt to GDP, we didn't have any sufficient recent data to look at the period holistically, so we'll ignore this for now. Then when you look at inflation, you've got Congo and Chad. So while Congo was significantly stable, Chad was showing some tendencies to kind of catch up, but that also is dependent on the reduction in variability for them. If the variability reduces for Chad's inflation rate, then it could catch up to Congo at the very least or surpass it soon. Hence, we're saying that the cardinal is falling here. And then, of course, for essentially perhaps our strongest contender in this region, relative to the USD forex rate, you've got Sao Tome and Principe. Whether you're looking at it for a whole analysis period or 2024 alone or the forex rate stability, Sao Tome was a cardinal. And while you've got contenders by way of Angola and the CAF nations, because of the wide gap between the rates and also the fact that Sao Tome's USD rate is very stable, there's no indication that the cardinal in this case will fall here. So that's been the breakdown of the data that I analyzed for Central Africa. Again, if you watch chapter zero, you know where I'm going next. So I look forward to your feedback. I welcome any comments or questions or any other insights you might have noticed or any insights that were triggered. Feel free to share them in the comments just so we can interact and I can also learn from you. Maybe even on the ground, then there are certain things you know or see which might contradict what I've presented here. So I look forward to that as well, and you're welcome to share. I will see you in chapter 2 for the next one. Take care.